Here's my story. My wife and I have been married for 3 years. Before we got married, Cecilia and I had been dating for a year and a few months. I met her at a bachelorette party and she was the younger cousin of one of the guys I met there. His name was Andrew, and he seemed to be a nice guy. I can't explain why, but something drew me to Cecilia, although I didn't get to see her well that night until the next day at the wedding. She and her cousin were longtime friends with the groom, and they both flew in from another state to attend the wedding. After the wedding, I tried to talk to Cecilia, but she didn't seem to have time for me, so I didn't disturb her anymore. Instead, I got her cousin's contact from the WhatsApp group we belonged to and asked him if he could share his cousin's number, and he did, without asking for her permission first. Initially, talking to Cecilia seemed challenging, but I kept calling her, and in the end, she agreed to go on a date with me. As a nurse, I had a 1-week leave, and I used the opportunity to visit her in the state she lived in. Through getting to know her, I discovered she worked with a marketing organization and had been there for 3 years. We both realized we were single as we talked more, but Cecilia was not ready for a relationship. Her ex-boyfriend left her for an older, wealthier woman, and since then she has been struggling with feelings of abandonment. However, I knew that no matter how tough she seemed on the outside, she was just a delicate flower inside. And with the right amount of love, care, and attention, she would blossom and break through her barriers. So I did my best to shower her with all of that, even as friends. I even got her cousin to talk to her for me, so she could at least consider being with me. And fortunately, she was the kind of younger cousin that listened to her older cousin, so she gave me a chance. We grew closer, and I made sure to be there for her whenever she needed me, because I loved her. The thing about me was that getting attracted to a particular girl did not happen to me every day. So when I saw Cecilia and liked her, I knew she was the one for me. Despite living in different states, I made sure to send her flowers every week, with a pack of her favorite chocolates, until she said yes to me. When she finally said yes, I was overjoyed, and as soon as I was due for my next leave, I hopped on the next flight to celebrate the beginning of our new life together. I only had a few responsibilities, as the house I lived in was left to me by my father before his passing, so I didn't have to pay rent and could save more money. Even when we were apart, I would send Cecilia money to treat herself to a fancy restaurant, go shopping, or even take her friends out on my behalf. I did everything possible to make her happy and not feel the distance between us until we got married. After we got married, her office transferred her to my state, and we began living together as a couple. A few months after Cecilia moved, she started working at a new office in our state. When Cecilia moved in with me, I began to notice many things that I had not seen before when we were in a long-distance relationship. She was messy in the kitchen, bathroom, and even the bedroom. I complained about her habits every day until I eventually got tired, so I started cleaning up after her. She also took offense to almost everything I did. For example, if I cleaned the house and she walked into a wet floor, she would yell and curse at me. This behavior continued with almost everything. Then she stopped cooking and didn't care whether I ate. Instead, she would bring home-cooked food from any restaurant she visited and microwave it the following day for breakfast. Before these changes, Cecilia loved cooking and wouldn't go a day without making fresh food. She hated reheating food the next morning, and she always woke up very early to cook before I woke up. But when this happened, she became a different person. More distant, and barely speaking to me, even when she was at home. It got so bad that whenever I tried to start a conversation, she would cut me off with the excuse that she had work to do or was too tired to talk. After that, she didn't even let me touch her anymore, and a part of me began to suspect that she was seeing someone. But when I couldn't gather any evidence, I just let her be, because I had heard that people can change completely after a few years of marriage. Her cold attitude towards me continued, and she even started sleeping on the couch because I constantly pestered her to do her wifely duties. One day, I don't really remember what Cecilia did, but I yelled at her. Instead of resolving the issue like adults, she packed a few clothes and told me she was going to her friend's house. She even threatened me not to call her friend if I didn't want to make things worse. So I didn't. 2 days after Cecilia left, I was at home thinking about how bad things had gotten between us when I received a call from a policeman. At first, I thought she had parked incorrectly or something, but I was told she had been in an accident and the police officer shared the location. Without wasting any time, I rushed there with my heart nearly falling into my stomach. The last thing I wanted was for something terrible to happen to my Cecilia. When I arrived at the accident scene, Cecilia was lying on a stretcher, sobbing. Her hands and arms were bandaged and she had sustained multiple injuries. Unfortunately, the driver did not survive and his body was already covered. Not to sound insensitive, but I was relieved that Cecilia was okay. I know we had issues in the past, but I didn't want her to be hurt or injured. I wanted us to work things out and go back to being the happy couple we used to be. I tried to talk to her, but she kept sobbing. At the same time, a paramedic came to me and asked if I was her brother because he saw me standing by her bed. I told him I wasn't, but he insisted on calling Cecilia's brother instead of me. It was funny because I was the one she was married to. Because Cecilia was an only child, when I asked her to show me the number she called, she showed me my number and explained that she had saved it as her brother on her iPhone. I was confused because that was the last thing I expected to hear. I also found out that the man who died while driving Cecilia was her boyfriend, and they were on their way to another state for a vacation when the accident happened. Whatever was left of their clothes was in the trunk, and I stood there, unable to say a word. It was just too much for me to wrap my head around at that point. I cried and asked Cecilia if it was true, and she nodded. She was still in tears because of her lover's death, and she couldn't even hide it. Despite our constant fights and distance, I couldn't imagine being with another woman besides her, but she chose to hurt me like that. I had even planned to go to her friend's house that evening, to settle things and have her come back home, not knowing she was already on her way to a vacation with her lover. She was eventually taken to the hospital and stayed there for a few weeks. However, I only visited her once during her hospital stay because I still couldn't believe she had cheated on me after all those years, and it was really tough for me. The one time I did visit her, her friend convinced me to go and see her, but I ended up standing outside her room door. I just couldn't bring myself to go in and talk to her. Finally, when she fully recovered, her friend updated me again and I went to see her on the day she was discharged. What she didn't know was that while she was in the hospital, I had contacted a lawyer and started the process of getting a divorce. On the day of her discharge, I gave her the divorce papers to sign. At least I had the decency to wait until she had recovered. When she saw me, she started crying, went down on her knees and begged me to forgive her so we could be a happy family again. But I told her it wasn't possible and handed her the divorce papers. When her friend saw the papers, she also begged me, but I told her to stay quiet and mind her own business. Meanwhile, Cecilia continued to cry and begged me for a second chance, but I dropped the papers and left. I warned her not to come back to my house. I had already called her cousin to tell him what Cecilia had done, but he was too disappointed in her and wanted nothing to do with her. It turned out that the man she was seeing was her colleague from work, and her company had a strict policy against relationships between colleagues. Knowing that she was married, they fired her to protect their reputation. So after she left the hospital, she had no job to return to. Her friend kicked her out, and her cousin was too embarrassed to help her, so she had no one to support her. The last time I saw her friend, she told me that Cecilia was struggling financially and doing odd jobs just to make ends meet. It has been 2 years now, and I still can't shake off the feeling that every woman out there might hurt me again, just like Cecilia did. OP, you mentioned that your ex-wife saved your number as her brother on her iPhone, which is absolutely terrible. This means she had been deceiving you for a very long time. I am not a fan of long-distance relationships because of how insincere both parties can be. Honestly, I do not believe your wife truly loved you. She was simply using you. You should have delved deeper when you noticed the changes, and you should have known better that people do not just wake up and change. She should have ended things with you, instead of cheating on you with her colleague. It is good that you found out the truth the hard way and did not allow her or her friend to convince you to change your mind. She did not deserve a second chance, and I am glad you were strong in your decision-making. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now let us move on to the second story for today. My wife and I had been married for several years before I caught her red-handed, cheating on me. Evelyn and I were both members of the same fellowship, and she was stunning. I would often attend church on Sundays just to catch a glimpse of her. However, we were not close friends until I discovered that my aunt had moved into her neighborhood, just 3 houses down from my aunt's house. At that time, we were just teenagers and were not close friends, as I mentioned earlier, because I was not the type of guy she would typically associate with. About 4 years later, my aunt passed away from cancer, and I stopped visiting the neighborhood. Everyone moved on with their lives, but I changed. Something happened to me that I cannot share here, and it pushed me to take a different direction in life. I became more serious about my dreams, education, career, and spiritual life. Before this, I was a wild young man, doing things my peers did without considering the consequences for the future. Fortunately, I went to college, graduated, and found a job. One day, I ran into Evelyn on my way back from work. It was a pleasant surprise, and we exchanged contact information. When we were both free a few days later, we hung out and caught up on what had happened in our lives over the past few years, especially with me. After our first meeting, we continued to hang out, and slowly my love for her reignited. When I felt the time was right, I asked her out, and she said yes. We dated for 2 years, and during that time, Evelyn and I never became intimate. I had changed, and I did not want her to think I was only with her for her body. Additionally, my relationship with God grew, and I did not want to jeopardize that, so Evelyn and I promised to remain celibate until marriage. Eventually, we got married and became intimate on our wedding night. However, I felt like Evelyn was not enjoying our intimate moments, no matter how much effort I put in. She did not say anything to boost my confidence or show any enthusiasm. She just laid there, as if waiting for me to finish, and this continued for almost 3 years. We wanted to have children early on because I did not want to be an older father, but no matter how much we tried, we were unsuccessful. No edits needed. Both strings are identical. I understood why he was always around her and at my house, and why she couldn't go a single day without calling him. It wasn't because he was like a father figure to her, but because they were cheating on me. Evelyn began to cry and started to beg me, but I was so disgusted that I didn't even want to look her in the eye. Eventually, Evelyn left with her uncle, and they were both embarrassed by the attention from the neighbors. After she left, she tried to call me multiple times, but I blocked her. She didn't return to the house because of the embarrassment. Later, I discovered that she had been having an affair with Jesse since she was young, even though we had promised to save ourselves for each other. The whole time Jesse visited my home, they were cheating on me. I even bought him gifts to show my appreciation and treated him with so much love. Around the same time, I resigned from my job and contacted a lawyer to help process the divorce papers. In the end, we divorced and went our separate ways. The wound from that heartbreak has not healed since then. Today would have been our 4th anniversary, and I feel it's better to share this here to lessen the burden I've carried for so long. I hate her so much for what she did to me. It would have been better if she had never come into my life and hurt me like this. I hope she gets her karma. As for her family, I don't know what happened when they found out, and I don't care. But I hope everyone sees her as the monster she is. OP, your ex-wife was secretly having an affair with her uncle for almost 3 years while living under your roof, and you didn't suspect a thing. You must have really trusted her. She should not have led you on if she knew she wasn't ready to stop her deceitful actions. This is why they say, don't judge a book by its cover. I used her external appearance as a metric to measure her as wife material, and I was wrong. I'm glad I kicked her out of my house and made the right decision by ending things with her. Thank you for sharing with us. I hope you have been able to heal from this. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If you have a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.